Hello everyone and welcome to my Bachelor Nation 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Joan Vassos' unforgettable moment with seniors in assisted living. Joan Vassos and some of her golden bachelorette suitors went to prom on the latest episode of the popular TV show. The event was a huge hit, so Joan decided to throw another prom. But this time, she celebrated with seniors living in an assisted living facility. Stay on this page for all the details. Theresa Nist gives former Golden Bachelor rival advice. Theresa Nist's love with Jerry Turner didn't last long, but she had some advice for Joan Vassos. Both ladies were contestants on the first Golden Bachelor season. Joan left after a few episodes to deal with a family matter. Theresa went on to get engaged, marry and divorce Jerry Turner in less than a year. Theresa spoke to the New York Post about Joan's season. She said that the network made the right choice. Theresa shared this advice with Joan. So what we talked about was that she was going to give every single man her undivided attention so that she would really see if there was a connection. That's what we talked about. The Golden Bachelor alum added that Joan takes the role very seriously. What an incredible spot to be in. And she realizes it. She knows what an opportunity this is, and she knows she represents women everywhere. That includes women living in assisted living. Joan Vassos' unforgettable moment with seniors in assisted living. The magic of prom isn't just for high schoolers. Thanks to the kindness of Golden Bachelorette star Joan Vassos, a group of seniors in the Bristol assisted living facility got to experience the joy of this special night. Vassos hosted a prom just for them, complete with all the glitz and glamour of a traditional prom. According to BachelorNation.com, the living area was decked out with balloons, streamers, and other prom-themed decorations. The event included finger foods and a charcuterie spread. There was also a prom court to name the facility's prom king and queen. The prom king revealed that he never went to his high school prom. One senior resident couldn't stop gushing over Joan Vassos. So friendly, so warm, so nice. I can see why you picked her. Another praised the event. I didn't expect this. The food is good, and the costumes are lovely, they said. Joan Vassos had always been a woman of action, but her heart, at its core, was tender. As a volunteer at Pine Hills Assisted Living, she found a new rhythm in life, one that was slower but more meaningful. Each week, she dedicated time to bringing joy to the elderly residents there, often organizing activities like painting sessions, reading circles, or music therapy. However, what she experienced that crisp autumn afternoon was something that would stay with her forever. The day had begun like any other, the sun dappling through the windows of the activity room, casting soft golden hues on the linoleum floors. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the faint perfume of lavender from Mrs. Harding, one of the more spirited residents. Joan had set up a memory lane activity, where the seniors would bring old photographs or mementos and share the stories behind them. She hoped it would spark conversation and bring some light into the room. As she arranged chairs in a loose circle, the room began to fill. Mrs. Thompson shuffled in with her walker, her eyes twinkling behind her thick glasses. I brought something special today, Joan, she said, a hint of mischief in her voice. Joan smiled warmly and helped her settle into a chair. Next came Mr. Callahan, quiet and reserved as always, carrying a small, tattered photograph. He didn't say much, but his presence was steady, like an old oak tree. Behind him was Mrs. Delgado, whose laugh was a melody all its own. She clutched a small music box in her hands, the lid slightly askew. The room hummed with anticipation, each senior cradling a piece of their past, as if it were the most delicate thing in the world. Joan took a seat and welcomed everyone. Today, she began, her voice soft but clear. We're going to take a trip down memory lane. I know each of you brought something special, and I can't wait to hear the stories that come with them. Mrs. Thompson was the first to speak. She pulled a small, faded lace handkerchief from her pocket. This, she said, her voice filled with pride, was given to me by my mother on my wedding day. She told me it would bring me luck, and for 50 years it did. She chuckled softly, and Joan noticed tears welling up in her eyes, though they never fell. Next, Mr. Callahan stood, holding out his photograph. It was a black and white picture of a young man in a World War II uniform, standing proudly next to a plane. "This is me," he said simply. The room was silent, everyone leaning in a little closer. Joan had always wondered about his past. He was a man of few words, but this moment revealed a depth to him that she hadn't yet seen. "I flew over the Pacific," he continued. "Saw things I don't like to remember. But this photo? It reminds me of the courage I had back then. Sometimes I think we all need reminding of who we used to be." Joan felt a lump form in her throat as the weight of his words settled over the room. Mr. Callahan sat back down, his expression as still as ever, but something had shifted in him. One by one, the residents shared their stories, each more poignant than the last. Mrs. Delgado opened her music box, and a soft, tinkling tune filled the air. "My father gave me this when I was just a little girl," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "He told me that whenever I was lonely, I could open it, and it would sing to me." She closed the box gently, her eyes misty. "It still works after all these years." Joan listened intently, her heart swelling with each story. She could see how much these memories meant to them, fragments of a life well lived, pieces of a puzzle that made them who they were today. And though time had weathered their bodies, their spirits remained unbroken, illuminated by the love they had known, the losses they had endured, and the moments that had defined them. As the session neared its end, Joan felt a sense of fulfillment. But little did she know, the most unforgettable moment was yet to come. Suddenly, the double doors swung open, and in walked Mrs. Simmons, one of the quieter residents, with a violin case in her hand. Joan had never seen her with it before, nor had anyone else, judging by the surprise on their faces. Mrs. Simmons was in her 80s, frail and soft-spoken, always preferring the background to the spotlight. Without saying a word, she made her way to the front of the room and opened the case. Inside was a beautifully aged violin, the wood polished and smooth from decades of use. Joan's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea Mrs. Simmons could play. With a grace that seemed to defy her years, Mrs. Simmons lifted the violin to her chin, her fingers trembling slightly as she positioned them on the strings. Then, with the bow in hand, she began to play. The first notes were soft and hesitant, but as she found her rhythm, the melody blossomed into something magical. It was a hauntingly beautiful tune, one that seemed to pull at the very soul of the room. The seniors sat in rapt attention, some closing their eyes, others smiling wistfully. Joan felt tears prick her eyes as the music filled every corner of the room, weaving through the air like a delicate thread connecting them all. For a few minutes, time seemed to stand still. The world outside ceased to exist, and all that mattered was the sound of that violin, the music carrying with it years of emotion, of memories too deep for words. It was as if Mrs. Simmons was sharing a piece of her soul with them, a part of herself that had been hidden for so long, but was now finally free. When the last note faded into silence, the room remained still. Joan wiped a tear from her cheek and looked around. The seniors were smiling, some crying, but all of them seemed lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. Mrs. Simmons lowered the violin and looked at Joan with a small, shy smile. "I used to play for my husband," she said softly. "He always said it was the sound of love." In that moment, Joan knew she had witnessed something truly special. It wasn't just about memories or stories. It was about the connection they all shared, the humanity that still pulsed through each of them, no matter their age or infirmity. Joan left Pine Hills that day with a full heart, knowing that she had been part of something unforgettable, something that would stay with her and everyone else in that room for the rest of their days.